The air on the bridge of the Indomitable was thick with the scent of expensive cigars, all stolen from a human trading ship. Grok lounged on a heap of expensive-looking boxes, his pristine claws and fangs gleaming in contrast to his untidy fur.
"How do we silence that thing?"
Reaching for a lighter hidden among his thick fur, he rekindled his cigar, the acrid smoke curling past a nearby stroller where the little human cried.
"If you keep your fangs out of the loot and go back to your station, it might stop."
Uzor looked tense. His eyes were transfixed on the viewport, following each turn of the subspace tunnel as he guided the Indomitable away from human space.
"Give me a break,"
Grok said.
"First you complain about the cargo here, and now this? Did you forget how we used to feast with the booze of those leaf leakers? What were they called? Oxens? And that time with the Palladium ship? If I recall correctly, you abandoned the stick in hyperspace to have some fun with that three-eyed beauty we took as insurance."
As Uzor turned back in the captain's seat, the strange light from subspace glinted in his eyes.
"Something feels off."
Uzor shifted his attention to the stroller where his eyes stayed.
"There was no fear in those warriors. We took their guns, we tied them, but when we ran back to the ship, they looked like they would bite off our legs if we got too close." "No fear? You should see the mother of this thing."
The cigar tip glowed as he inhaled the smoke.
"You wouldn't believe how much water she leaked when I got our loud exit insurance here. Just the typical leaf leaker behavior."
Uzor stood up and left the stick. In silence, he walked towards Grok and casually reached for a transparent bottle from the pile of boxes and unsorted goods below Grok. The captain, bottle in hand, located a glass and set it down with a decisive clink. With his eyes on the glass, Uzor's claw pried the blue cap free with a sharp pop. The bottle tilted, pouring transparent liquid into the waiting glass. Uzor, however, didn't drink. Instead, he took the glass, approached Grok, and ordered, "Take a sip." Grok failed to understand the captain, but that didn't mean he refused.
"A sip? Forget who you're talking to?"
Uzor didn't reply, simply pushing the glass closer. Grok gripped the glass, the clear liquid unremarkable at first glance. Yet Uzor's silence held a warning. This was potent stuff. But why should that matter? Grok lifted the glass to his lips, eyes locked onto Uzor, and swallowed the liquid in one fiery gulp. At least, he thought he did, until his insides burned. His body rejected the burning and expelled everything onto the ground. He could only make guttural noises as he kept spitting into the ground.
"That tastes like leaf leaker booze to you, Grok?" Uzor ordered. "Go to the main deck and inform the gang I need them back here."
His gaze landed on the stroller.
"We need to be ready if those things follow our trail."
Alone on the bridge, with the little human in the stroller, Uzor noticed 2 dots appear on the screen. The Indomitable's radar was picking up 2 hyperspace signatures, which meant something was following them through the subspace tunnel. This was a rare occurrence, given the dangers of tunnel collapse that could eject both ships into real space with unpredictable results. Uzor was apprehensive, but didn't panic. Although rare, the usual raiding plan had contingencies for this. He could either return to normal space to leverage the Indomitable's sublight speed in a long chase, or he could change course midway through hypertravel. The former solution would put him at the mercy of the enemy's guns for a while, and this would put those humans' care for the hostage to the test. As for the change of course, it would overload the core, consuming twice as much energy as usual and risking a meltdown. But who else besides pirates would have the guts to try that? Being more willing to bet on the durability of the Indomitable than on the humans' care about their own, Uzor pressed some buttons and twisted some dials. Before long, the chart with the core power consumption began to rise, until it was way over the safety limit. The space tunnel shifted drastically, and the ship trembled violently, alarms blaring. The stroller was freely moving from wall to wall, the crying a constant. Unbothered by it, Uzor watched as vibrant colors of the subspace tunnel transitioned until one last vibration marked their return to normal space, the short travel taking them much further than any sublight engine could. Grok burst onto the bridge, panic etched on his face.
Uzor, what's happening?
"We've got company," Uzor said, his voice calm despite the urgency in his eyes. "Where's the crew?" Grok's booming voice echoed through the corridor.
Come here, party's over.
Uzor briefly acknowledged the newcomers on the bridge, but his gaze lingered on the door, waiting for the rest, who it turned out were missing.
Skull, Fangs, where's everyone?
Uzor asked.
Blade's not in the right state for the bridge, and Kiara's out cold from that alien booze, Skull explained.
Fantastic. No fight and already short-handed, Uzor grumbled. Skull, you take Nav. Fangs, help Grok with weapons. Forget comms for now.
The crew exchanged unenthusiastic glances, then shuffled to their positions, eyes flickering between the empty space and the captain. Uzor scrambled for an explanation. How to make those muscleheads understand he needed them to stay just in case. But before he could explain, Skull announced,
2 ships on our tail. Just entered regular space.
What? Did they overload their cores too?
There was something that still didn't make sense.
Why did they take so long to get here?
Skull answered easily.
They're huge, Cap. At least 10 times our size.
Uzor's worry decreased considerably.
Big and slow? Perfect.
Grok, stationed at the weapons console, chimed in, his voice trembling with excitement.
They're hailing us,
he reported, eyeing the comm panel with a predatory glint.
Incoming message, Fangs.
Hold it, Uzor interjected.
Engage thrusters. You two intercept any fire. They probably won't attack, but be prepared for anything.
Grok's fur bristled, itching for a fight.
Old school. I like it.
The sublight engines roared to life, thrusting the ship forward with a jolt. Gravity flickered momentarily as the regulators struggled to adjust.
What's their status, Skull?
Uzor barked.
They haven't activated their engines yet, Captain,
the navigator replied coolly.
They're doing the only thing they are good at,
Grok growled, his eyes glued to the comm panel.
Those leaf leakers are hailing us on every channel.
Lights on the comm panel blinked furiously, each new flicker highlighting the humans' frantic attempts at communication. Despite his outward confidence, a sliver of unease gnawed at Uzor. He couldn't shake the memory of those enraged eyes staring after them as they left. His foreboding was confirmed.
Their engines are active,
Skull announced. A beat later, he added urgently,
Single missile launch! ETA 1.5 minutes!
Uzor barked out an order.
Grok, Fangs, launch interceptors!
The crew sprang into action, their faces etched with determination. The incoming missile wasn't particularly fast, but something about it unsettled Uzor. Were the humans willing to resort to fratricidal tactics? In his book, that was the mark of a truly formidable foe. With overkill efficiency for the time remaining, Grok and Fangs each launched an interceptor. Tension crackled in the air as the seconds ticked by. Then cheers erupted as Skull announced,
Missile intercepted! Threat neutralized!
Uzor remained stoic, despite the celebratory mood.
Skull, speed report?
They're fat and slow, Cap. No trouble outrunning them, the navigator assured him.
Uzor wasn't convinced. His gaze remained fixed on the comm panel, the blinking lights a persistent source of unease. A glance at the subspace radar yielded nothing new. He was engrossed in a core temperature check when Skull's voice cut through the tense silence.
Missile barrage incoming! 10 of them! ETA 1 minute 40!
Grok and Fangs tensed in their seats. Uzor issued a grave command, his voice filled with urgency.
Launch interceptors, 1 per missile. Conserve ammo.
The Indomitable wasn't an arsenal, and interceptor stock wasn't limitless. They had to make this count.
Interceptors fired,
said Grok. The silence cut the bridge like a knife in the heart as they waited. This lasted until Skull's voice was heard again.
7 missiles intercepted! 3 still coming towards us. ETA 40 seconds.
Uzor's order was a single word.
Interceptors. Interceptors launched,
Grok confirmed grimly. They held their breaths, and the crying of the little hostage resumed as if it had detected the tension in the air. Time seemed to crawl as the seconds ticked by. Uzor knew they wouldn't have another shot if these failed. Skull's voice betrayed a hint of despair.
2 intercepted. 1 went through. Brace for impact.
Uzor stood staring into the void. The indomitable, stripped of defenses for speed, seemed doomed. He'd accepted his fate, a pirate's end, oblivion with a bang. But the expected explosion never came. Instead, a metallic rain pummeled the hull. Confusion replaced fear as Uzor saw through the viewport a group of inert spheres clinging to the ship. The sight evoked many questions, but one in particular seemed extremely important. Were those explosives the humans would use to force a trade for the hostage? That made a lot of sense. If they tried to go away, the indomitable would go boom, and everyone inside, hostage included, would return to the void. If they traded for the hostage, then he and his crew would at least have a chance to escape. Those assumptions seemed so logical that he was shocked when Skull's uncertain voice announced,
Missiles fired! They are... No, this can't be right! The radar says there are 100 of them!
Uzor spun towards the weapons duo, his eyes a desperate plea. Grok's confirmation hung heavy in the air.
The auxiliary system says 100.
The usually taciturn Fangs chimed in, his voice barely a whisper.
Mine too. 100.
Despite the threat of looming doom, Uzor had maintained a semblance of composure. Now, however, his voice cracked.
The interceptors. Launch everything we have.
But his command was met with defiance. Grok, ever the picture of stoicism, rose abruptly, ignoring the order.
5 left, Captain,
he grumbled, already reaching for a flask of alien liquor.
Fangs, you in?
Fangs, the shy pirate, offered a curt nod, resignation momentarily replacing his usual timidity. With a shared look, they abandoned their stations, leaving Uzor alone at the helm. Silence, thick and suffocating, descended upon the control room. Skull's voice, oblivious to the atmosphere, continued its monotonous countdown.
ETA 1 minute and...
Uzor snapped.
Shut up,
he barked, his voice seething with a fury born of helplessness. Grok and Fangs, already pouring alien liquor over the comms station, barely registered his outburst. Uzor stormed over, his presence a dark cloud.
Pour one for the cap,
Grok offered half-heartedly. Uzor ignored him, his gaze fixed on the console. With grim efficiency, he bypassed the glasses and bottle, initiating a direct video channel. On the screen, a group of surprised humans materialized. Their chatter died down as a man in civilian clothes stared into the camera, his voice screaming urgency. Don't panic! The missiles won't destroy you! We don't want violence! Stand down your weapons and release the hostage unharmed! We can still negotiate a peaceful resolution! Disbelief crackled in the tense silence.
Peaceful resolution?
Uzor scoffed. The man continued, his tone strangely conciliatory. We're not interested in your stolen cargo, or in serving your punishment. Simply return the hostage safely. Here's the truth. We lack the authority to arrest you, let alone destroy your ship. Get us what we need, and even if you, let's say, slip away before reinforcements arrive, that wouldn't concern us. This human wasn't the hardened soldier Uzor expected. No hatred glinted in his eyes, no strength emanated from him. A flicker of hope ignited in Uzor's chest, only to be extinguished by a deafening clang. Grok, ever the impulsive one, slammed his fist into the comms panel, severing the connection.
Lies!
Grok roared, spittle flying.
They're just toying with us while their missiles stay out of reach.
A primal fury unlike anything he'd known surged through Uzor. He was about to unleash it on Grok when Skull's voice crackled through the comms, tainted with raw fear.
Missiles incoming! Brace for impact!
No one braced. There was no impact. Instead, a metallic rain pummeled the hull once more. The cacophony so intense it felt like the ship was being pounded in a metal forge. This time, the barrage added a significant amount of mass. Uzor could feel the Indomitable sluggishly decelerate under the weight of something. The viewport revealed a horrifying sight. The hull encrusted with layers of black spheres. They clung to each other like a perverse form of barnacles, caging them in the ship like a cocoon. A thought wormed its way into Uzor's mind. Who in their right mind would attack by weighing down their enemy's ship? But that's exactly what Skull confirmed.
Sensors offline! Acceleration crippled! Everything seems functional, Captain. But the weight! They'll catch up to us soon!
Grok fumed, disbelief twisting his features. Surrender? That lily-livered captain had to be joking. The moment those humans got their precious hostage back, they'd vaporize the Indomitable with them all on board.
Here's what we do,
Grok growled, slamming his fist on the console.
We stay silent, hunker down, and wait. No one knows this ship like us. When they come for us, we'll pick them off one by one and take prisoners until they offer us a ship.
A humorless snort escaped him.
Those leaf lickers are too soft to sacrifice one of their own. How much do you think they waste on those fancy missiles? If they're this naive, we can exploit their weakness.
Uzor shook his head, defeated. We're already beaten, Grok. Surrender might buy us a chance to escape imprisonment. They wouldn't dare execute us. Nobody wants to mess with our kind. Skull and Fangs watched the argument unfold, their eyes flickering nervously between the two pirates.
Cowardice, Uzor!
Grok spat, dismissing the captain. He turned to Skull and Fangs, his voice hardening.
I'm taking the rest of the crew. What about you two? Bridge duty babysitting our passenger with the captain, or down to the cargo bay to grab your blasters and show those humans why we're not to be trifled with?
Their eyes darted to Uzor, who stood silent, his arguments exhausted. Fangs hesitantly stepped towards Grok, a silent declaration of allegiance. Skull offered a small apologetic,
"Sorry, Cap,"
before joining them. With a final triumphant glance at Uzor, Grok stormed out of the bridge, Fangs and Skull trailing behind. The captain was left alone in the tense silence, the small human the only witness to his crumbling authority. The trio, Grok, Fangs, and Skull, navigated the long corridor, their boots echoing ominously towards the cargo bay, where they would prepare to make their last stand. Grok surveyed the motley crew assembled in the cargo bay, their faces grim beneath the flickering emergency lights.
Blasters, everyone! We're patching every viewport and entrance. If those humans try to board, open fire. The vacuum of space is on our side, and they won't risk their own lives. We hold our position, we wait for their move, then we hit them back hard and take prisoners. We've got the upper hand here. If we can get enough of them, I bet they will surrender their ship to us.
With Fangs and Skull's help, the crew scrambled into action. Blasters were hefted, and shouts were exchanged as they secured the hatches. Grok's gaze fell upon Blade, the comms officer, slumped against a crate reeking of booze.
"Shove a blaster in his hand,"
Grok barked.
"If he can wobble, he can shoot."
The atmosphere became lively, and Grok felt the anticipation for battle that he loved so much. This was the same feeling he enjoyed before every single raid they performed. Time seemed to warp under the weight of their anticipation. A shudder ran through the Indomitable, a groaning of metal against metal that spoke of ships grappling in the void. The humans were close, latched onto their hull. What happened next was a lot of noise coming out of one specific place in the hull. It was not a viewport, nor was it the hatches, but just a metal wall with nothing special about it. First there was some drilling noise. Then that random section of the hull began to vibrate with dissonant sounds. This gave way to an ominous silence, broken only by the hiss of escaping gas. The crew huddled behind crates, their eyes wide with fear and defiance. All except Blade, that is. He strutted around the cargo bay, brandishing his blaster with drunken bravado, oblivious to the very real danger that threatened to consume them all.
"Blade, get over here!"
Grok barked, a flicker of concern breaking through his gruffness. He didn't want a needless casualty, not so soon at least. Blade, however, waved him off with a sloppy salute, completely oblivious to the danger. Instead of seeking cover, he marched towards the hissing wall, blaster pointed defiantly at the unremarkable metal. Just then, a shape flickered on the surface, the outline of a hidden door. Before anyone could react, a blinding flash filled the cargo bay, followed by a deafening boom. The makeshift door, superheated and warped, rocketed from its frame, slamming into Blade with a sickening thud. The unfortunate comms officer disappeared beneath the twisted metal as he screamed. Grok grimaced. Even in the face of imminent danger, some idiots couldn't resist a good show of bravado. The reeking smell of burnt fur filled the air as Blade's screams ceased. Morale, already shaky, plummeted. Skull and Fangs exchanged a grim glance. Before they could formulate a new strategy, a volley of strange objects arced through the air, spitting white smoke that seared eyes and lungs. Grok stumbled back, coughing violently, while others blindly fired towards the newly formed hatch, obscured by the choking haze. The smoke spread relentlessly, engulfing the cargo bay in an acrid cloud. Grok kicked one of the smoke sources, but it didn't help much since it got stuck on a crate. Retreating to the corridor wall, he squinted through the smoke, blaster trained on the new door. Just as he caught a glimpse of glowing green eyes, a deafening bang and flash engulfed his senses. Mostly blind, Grok took some distance away from the smoke, while others tried to resist it to get a clear shot at the newly made door. Be it the corridor or the cargo deck, everything was slowly being conquered by smoke. Taking cover on the corridor wall, Grok blinked incessantly, his vision clearing to reveal a chaotic scene. Skull and Fangs, eyes squeezed shut, were firing their blasters wildly, but the next sound wasn't a volley. It was a single, powerful shot. Fangs took it in the chest, jerking his whole body backward, his fur riddled with small, bloody holes. The weight of their predicament settled on Grok like a suffocating shroud. They were trapped, disoriented, and down several crew members. Their fight against the unseen enemy had barely begun, and the result was close to being decided. Desperate resolve hardened Grok's features.
"To the bridge!"
he roared, his voice a galvanizing force.
"We'll use the hostage to our advantage!"
Uzor, a prisoner in his own ship, strained to hear over the distant chaos. The cacophony of battle in the cargo bay erupted suddenly, then fell eerily silent just as quickly. The tension in the bridge was as thick as the stale air. Just as Uzor contemplated attempting communication again, the bridge door slammed open. Grok burst in, a red-rimmed, coughing mess.
"Where's the crew?"
Uzor demanded, a sliver of hope flickering in his voice. Grok's only response was a ragged cough and a defiant glint in his eyes as he lunged for the hostage, blaster raised. He took cover behind the stroller and the heap of boxes, transforming cargo and little hostage into a makeshift shield against the enemies who would come from the door. Uzor had decided to attempt to surrender, and whether that was still possible or not, it wouldn't change what he'd do. Stand beside the viewport and wait to see what happens. Grok hadn't closed the bridge door, allowing Uzor to spot a small device emerging from the wall. A robotic voice then commanded, "Release the hostage and surrender." Grok, his bravado a facade, barely clinging on, coughed violently before spitting out,
"You'll never catch me alive! Come here! If you are true warriors, you'll have to shoot through!"
Uzor saw his opportunity. The robotic voice, devoid of emotion, was a chilling reminder of their predicament.
"He can do whatever he wants,"
Uzor called out, his voice surprisingly steady for the panic clawing at him.
"But I surrender."
The robotic voice, devoid of any warmth or reassurance, responded with another chilling command.
"Hands to the ground! Keep them where I can see them!"
Uzor complied, a cold dread settling in his stomach. The silence that followed was worse than the battle cries. It was the silence of the unknown, of what awaited him at the hands of the unseen humans. Grok, his bravado a facade barely clinging on, coughed violently before spitting out,
"You'll never catch me alive! Come here, leaf leakers! Time to see what you're made of! If you don't have the guts to shoot through this loud thing, I can stay here forever!"
There was no reply, only the unsettling movement of the small device in the door, its tip sweeping across the bridge like a predator's eye. Grok's bravado seemed to curdle under the silence. He kept shouting, his voice filled with a tremor that betrayed his bravado.
"What is it, leaf leakers? Too scared of my blaster? Come here and shoot through if you think you can."
That shaking in his voice made Uzor feel a sliver of hope bloom in his chest, a desperate hope that Grok's surrender might appease their unseen nemesis. But hope had no place on the indomitable. The humans didn't do anything besides what they had been challenged to do. Uzor heard a bang, and Grok's head cracked with a projectile hitting his temple, his body plummeting to the side. A glimpse of the hole and trail of sparks on the wall, and Uzor knew they had indeed shot through. Not through the hostage, but through the metallic wall of the indomitable. Uzor, frozen in terror, could only watch as the bridge was flooded with humans, clad in thick armored uniforms. Their visors glinted ominously, reflecting the red emergency lighting. With practiced efficiency, 2 of them descended upon him, their movements devoid of warmth. Before he could muster a whimper, his hands were yanked behind his back and secured with tight cuffs. Simultaneously, another pair of figures retrieved the stroller, whisking it away from the bridge with unsettling speed. It took some time for him to grow the courage to ask,
"What will happen to me?"
The lead human, his face obscured by a visor that glowed an emerald green, approached Uzor. The silence in the red-lit bridge stretched on, broken only by Uzor's ragged gasps for breath. Finally the human spoke, his voice a distorted rasp that sent shivers down Uzor's spine.
"Consequences.